All right. Can you all hear me? Great. Welcome and thank you all so much for coming to today's NeuroNext seminar. Today we have a very special and unique opportunity to hear from five experts with lived experience. Very excited to hear what you all have to say today. As a community that's engaged in research and scholarly activities, integrating the voice of the end user is so important if we want our work to have real meaningful influence in the end. Um, our panel is going to introduce themselves in just a bit, and then we'll have time for questions and conversation with the audience at the end. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. So, just on behalf of the Georgia Tech community, we want to say thank you to you all for sharing your time and your lives with us today. All right, I'll let you take it from here.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Babs McDonald, and my lived experience is with stroke. I experienced a stroke 6.5 years ago. And I'm not going to say a whole lot. The only thing I want to say to all of you is that be optimistic. People were not optimistic with me when I had my stroke, and now they say, I can't believe it. So many wonderful things are possible if you're optimistic and you're supportive. So that's all I really want. So we want them to introduce themselves. Okay, well then instead of me even starting, we'll start with Colby, but you go ahead.
Sure. No, can everybody hear me? I don't know if this lava is placed pretty well. Okay, awesome. My name is Colby Higgins. I am from Alpharetta, Georgia. I have a T4 incomplete spinal cord injury that I sustained almost 8 years ago now. My 8-year anniversary is just on the horizon at the end of April. And not probably 5 years or so after my injury, I became a recreational therapist, and I am currently working at the Shepherd Center up in Buckhead, if any of you know of that rehabilitation hospital up there. And one of the reasons that I decided to participate on this panel today was really just because I enjoy conversations with stakeholders like y'all within kind of this like rehabilitation space. I know many of you are like mechanical engineers working in like bioengineering, things like that. And I've participated in a few different research projects that are sort of adjacent to some of the fields and stuff that you guys are in. So it's always nice to just have some candid conversations and kind of tell my story and give my opinions on a few things. But I also really like to just try to interject, like I said, obviously a bit of my own story, but really kind of try to destigmatize disability whenever I speak with folks like y'all, because you probably just don't get a chance to see too many people with disabilities within your daily lives. So it's nice to come and chat with everybody. But that's me.
I am Mac. I started my stroke when I was 18. I'm 24. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Mac's caregiver and his mom. He sustained a couple of strokes almost 6 years ago next week because he has a rare brain disease that we did not know he had. It's called a brain AVM, and it ruptured in his head, and we had no idea he had it. And he went from a very able-bodied lacrosse player, tennis player, IB program, headed to Georgia, not Georgia Tech, but Georgia, and to basically sustaining 2 strokes and in recovery for the last 6 years. And so he does have aphasia, which is why I will be speaking for him most of the time. And if you're familiar with aphasia, it is where he struggles with finding his words. He understands everything that you say. He is taking classes online right now through KSU. And but because of the word finding difficulty, I'll be doing most of the speaking for him. We did want to participate because we love being able to help the community, gives Matt a lot of purpose to share his story and help others understand the world of disability and what can be possibly done to improve our world, make it more accessible. And he just loves being here at the college campus as well, right?
Hi, my name is Brandy Ellis, and I am currently based out of Atlanta. and I live with treatment-resistant depression. I actually had my cyborg anniversary it was this past November, 12 years. I have a deep brain stimulation implant as part of a clinical trial at Emory University here in Atlanta. And I'm here partly to help reduce the stigma, not only about disability, but mental illness, participation in clinical trials, being a research subject, but also to help researchers, engineers, clinicians to ask the right questions, design better research clinical trials, and just in general improve the lives of their current patients and future. So I'm very excited. I will talk to anybody about anything at any time. So if you have any questions, feel free to see me afterwards. I'll give you my card and talk later. Okay.
Hey, thank you very much. What we're going to do, the format is that I will ask a question and then each of the panelists, if they want to, will answer the question and then we'll move on to the next question. Okay? And each panelist will have about 3 minutes to answer the question. Okay, you ready for the first one?
I think so.
Okay. What do you want students, scientists, and engineers to know about your lived experience with your condition?
That's on Jeopardy. And I do want to express before I start answering questions that my opinions may differ from the rest of the panelists that are up here. So just kind of be open-minded as we go through different things. But
Can I interrupt? Just
yeah, of course.
you here in the back.
Here, hold on. Let's see if I can does this help? Okay. So yeah, what do I want folks to know about like my lived experience with my condition? We all have a varying degree of different things that we're dealing with up here. So, but for spinal cord injuries specifically, I would say that my life is it's drastically different than it used to be, but it's still good. How many of you and this is kind of where I want to interject a little bit more on the stigma of just living with disability. How many of you heard of like liminality or like a liminal space, by like a show of hands? Yeah. Okay. So when I was getting my master's degree in recreation therapy, obviously I was reading a bunch of research articles and all of these different things. And I came across one in a social psychology of recreation therapy class about like a liminal existence and like kind of how that pertains to disability. So thinking of just basic terms, like a liminal space, like an example would be between childhood and adulthood. You're like in that adolescent spot where you're not really a kid anymore, but you're not fully an adult either. Disability in my head anyway can kind of be the same way. You're not sick, but especially because of, societal perception, you're not necessarily well either. You might feel well, you might move around, get daily tasks done and all of that stuff. But a lot of people's perceptions, that varies differently from kind of my personal experience. Like maybe a few months ago, I was getting out of my car at a gas station. I went in just to buy myself a candy bar. And like what that looks like for me is I have to get my chair out of my car, put it together, and then go in the door and go in there and do my thing. And, a lot of people are like giving me like these side glances and stuff like that, like, wow, whatever. Some people will come up and ask if they can help. Usually I politely decline. But when I was buying my candy bar, this woman was like, I just watched you do all that. It seemed like a lot of work for you just to come in and buy a candy bar. And I was like, well, this is just what I do every day, man. This is, just like you walked in, got out of your car to come get whatever you were getting. I was doing the same thing. It just looked a lot different to you. It looked like it was challenging. It was hard. It's not hard for me. Not anymore. I had to learn how to do all of those things. But that's some of the stuff that I think all of us kind of live with. We learn to adapt and then it becomes like second nature. But that perception from outside society is not always there. But whatever you guys are doing in your field, it's obviously very important to increasing quality of life. And I think that just overall, what you're doing is obviously, like I said, super important. And we're just trying to educate the public, and make sure that there's like equitable resources out there for everybody. But yeah.
Okay, I'm going to speak for Mac. And we went over these questions and talked about it together, so he's on board. You want to say something? Oh, okay. He wants me to let you know that occasionally he's going to be closing his eyes, and it's not on purpose. It's not intentional because of the brain injury, which stroke is. He does involuntarily shut his eyes at times. He's still hearing you. He's not sleeping. He's been accused of sleeping by his therapist before, but he's not sleeping. So he truly is listening, and it's just another way to block out. It's just kind of a sensory thing. As some of you may know, you get overwhelmed by all these different things going on. That's his way of kind of shutting and trying to really focus. So kind of to tag on to what Colby was saying, Mac's life has changed dramatically. He went from being very able-bodied to losing his independence. And as a young person, I'm sure it was very challenging for Colby as well to be young and watch all your friends go out and do all the things that a typical young adult would be doing, and not to be able to do any of that. So yes, it was very shocking for all of us. I have 3 other kids and they're all able-bodied. But I will say that similar to Colby, we've embraced this change. We have found resources that have allowed him to enjoy life and find joy in life. Rec therapists have been a huge part of his therapy. In fact, that's probably Mac's greatest therapy is recreational therapy, where he can join in adaptive sports. He has always been a sports kid, so he races, he golfs, he climbs, he plays power wheelchair soccer. He does a lot of different things, different from you and I. But he has a life that he can pursue. But I would like to share that the challenges are still there. And as a caregiver, I probably take it harder than he does because it's definitely much more positive than I am sometimes. As a caregiver, I do find frustration with some of the inaccessible parts of our world. And I commend anyone who's in the field of wanting to do research and development and find new technology and ways to improve and make the world more accessible, because there's so many times that we just can't get somewhere because it's inaccessible, and it can be a very isolating life when that happens. His friends who are all able-bodied still, they'll come around, they'll take him out, and they've encountered it too, and it helps them see like, wow, your world is really different. And so I really appreciate and commend anyone who's willing to do things to change the world, to make the world more accessible for everyone, whether it's a physical or intellectual disability. We've encountered that as well. Now, having new friends in that world, we see it often. There was one other thing I wanted to say about the challenges. Well, I guess I forgot it. Sorry. If it comes up, I'll bring it up again. But I do want to say that we don't let it stop us. We're going to keep going. But we are hopeful. Oh, I know what it was. Something that Bab said about being optimistic. That, when we were in the hospital, we were told he'd never speak again. He'd never move the right side of his body because his stroke was on the left side. And good luck. You don't have, if he doesn't make progress in the first 6 months to a year, that's how he's going to be. Well, he's 6 years out and he can speak. He's taking college classes. He's not on a feeding tube any longer. He goes out and enjoys life with his friends. So I say stay positive, and you can defy anything. I think the brain is, and you all, as if you're studying neuroscience, know we strongly believe in neuroplasticity. It's there, and it can happen in anybody, able-bodied or not. I always used to tell my students when I taught, your brain can change, and you just have to practice. That's all it is.
So can you hear me? Okay. So I got a brain implant because I had an episode of depression that would not quit. I had tried dozens of medications of every dose and conceivable combination. I had done 26 treatments of electroconvulsive therapy. I had the most amazingly brilliant neuropsych who was trying every therapeutic option available, but until I got the implant, nothing worked. Now, I do want to clarify that I did not suddenly get happy, like a switch didn't flip. But what it did allow me was the ability for all of the therapies to suddenly be able to take effect. So I have now had an appropriate mood for over 12 years. And I make sure to take care of myself and pay attention to that. But if my device turns off, even if I don't know about it, I will get severely depressed again. There isn't a diet, a mindset, a willpower, anything that will change that reality. I have encountered very intelligent people, doctors, engineers, who have told me that the experiences I was describing were not accurate because they didn't fit in with a checklist of what my condition was supposedly supposed to be like. I was told that I was not trying hard enough to get well. And so I am here as a very enthusiastic advocate for neurotech and clinical trials and research, because there was this cosmic fortuity that allowed me to have the resources to persevere in spite of those people. And so I want everyone to remember that everybody has faced doubt and judgment, even if it's in their own mind. It's no less disturbing. So listen to what people are saying, not just how they say it or whether it matches a checklist. Those are things to keep in mind.
Thank you very much for that. The answers to the first question. I want to say what I was struck by, and I'm sure all of you are thinking something maybe similar, is just how amazing these people are to have overcome and in spite of a lot of odds against them, are really doing well and being very positive. And so that's really struck me. So thank you. Hey, the second question. Oh, and we will have a Q&A. So if you are formulating questions, don't forget them. Okay. All right. What has your experience participating in research been like? Are there any highlights or challenges?
All right. So I've participated in a few different research projects, spinal cord injury centered, obviously. Two of them were really targeting the remediation of spasticity. I don't know if any of you know too much about spinal cord injury itself, but that is one of the symptoms that comes along with it, is that you have excess like muscle tone, excess spasticity. It comes along with a few other conditions too. But it is like a hallmark in a lot of spinal cord injury patients. So a few of the studies were targeting that. And then I was also part of a device development study for a robotic exoskeleton fairly early on, after my initial rehabilitation. I enjoy being part of research because I think it's just fun kind of being like a data point and having that anonymity, and just saying, hey, I got to be a part of this, but who knows where it's going to go. And another part of it too, which I really try to hone in on too, is that I've developed a lot of really awesome connections with just like the research team that I was with. And I want, if any of you go into research and are working with people in the field and stuff like that, I think that just really thinking about, I know that you're focused on, the data and the collection and, the analysis and all of that kind of stuff, but think about like when you're in the room with that person, they're not just a subject, you know what I mean? They are a human being, and like establishing therapeutic rapport and really getting to know that person is like paramount. I think that you know, making that human connection with them is almost even more important sometimes than what you're actually doing in there that day. So it can bring a lot of really cool connections in that way too. A highlight for me was when I was doing the exoskeleton study, my spasticity and my tone are horrible. You might not know it, me sitting here with my leg crossed and all of that kind of stuff. But when you get me in a prone or like a standing position and stuff, my legs want to jump around all over the place. So when they would put me and stand me up in the exoskeleton, I was really challenging the device to do what it was supposed to do. And you know that pieces of equipment like that are like super expensive. So I would walk around in it, and eventually over time I was burning motors up in like the left hip and all of these different kinds of things. And I was like, cool, I'm doing like $50,000 worth of damage to this piece of robotic equipment. And they're gathering, you know, important data at the same time. They're like, okay, so this guy is here and he's a challenge for the device. How can we make it better? That was definitely neat. I think a challenge for maybe not myself, but for some people when they go into research is they're going in and expecting a potential benefit out of it. Like what, you know, I'm going to participate in this thing and like, oh, what positive result might I end up seeing? And I think that it can be hard to get past that for some people. And I think that like both of the spasticity trials that I went through, I like, you know, whatever they were doing to me, hooking electrodes up and like running all of these tests and stuff, like it didn't really end up affecting me in any kind of way, even though I was probably a valuable data point. But I think when people approach research, they have that positive mindset, and it can be kind of a letdown for some people every once in a while when they do participate and are not seeing any kind of dividends out of it. So that could be a bit of a drawback as well. So.
Okay. My participating in research for us or for Mac really gives us purpose. I think that was a really big thing, is to be able to help other people that are facing the same challenges that he might be facing. Similar to Colby, we've done a couple, well, actually here at Georgia Tech, with an exoskeleton, and then also with a device that helps move wheelchairs with your eyes. And I think that the highlights really were meeting the people, the researchers, the developers, all the students here at Georgia Tech. I think for Mac, it was just fun to be around all these young people and get to test something kind of cool. We took lots of videos and pictures, and he looks like a robot in this device. And I just think that knowing that we're helping to advance technology or advance improvement to other people's lives is a big deal. So knowing that we have that purpose, and then I guess the challenge would be for us, I think it was the device that we helped test. We saw a lot of, we thought was just going to be, this is fabulous. Can we have one now? And because it's still being developed, no, we can't. So I think that was probably our biggest disappointment, is that the two things that I can recall right now were very, very, I think, going to be successful and could have helped him currently. And but unfortunately in a test phase, and so not really able to take home with us and use it. So that was probably the only thing. But otherwise, I mean, we'd do it again. We would absolutely do it again. Anything else, Mac? You just like rolling around the campus and seeing all the girls and stuff, huh?
My trial experience was actually incredible. I have the most world-class trial team, and they treated me better than I could have ever expected, not just as a data point, and later on, even as a collaborator. So I am still in contact with them, and it was a truly wonderful relationship that I'm not lost to follow up. I still see them every year. So while most people might assume that the biggest challenge was being bolted to a surgical table awake all day while they drilled holes in my skull, it wasn't. And while I don't really want to repeat that experience, the biggest challenge was actually getting into any trial. I was dealing with a terminal case of depression, and I had been suffering for years. I had gone through many providers because I kept getting fired from some of them for liability reasons. When we talk about hope and the things people say, I did have a provider as a means of making sure I did not return, say to give up. I was never going to work again. There was nothing that would ever help me, and I should just find God. And so, things were not going well, but every single trial demanded a list of every medication and every dosage and every procedure and medical records from every provider for my entire history. And that's overwhelming in the absolute most ideal circumstances. It is nearly impossible when you are dealing with a brain that wants to undermine you / try and kill you. So that was absolutely the hardest part for me, was wanting desperately to do something and having the burden of that being placed on me when I was at my least able to handle that. Now, on the other hand, the highlights are just unimaginable in that, like, I now have a job and career that exceeds my wildest dreams. This is not my job, by the way. I do this for funsies. I have a long-term relationship with a partner who is every part of the word partnership. I have friends who, both old and new, ones who never knew me when I was sick. And the most recent highlight is that I got to meet a few months ago someone who was in with my trial team, but just got their device last year. And to witness the dramatic improvements in what my trial team has learned in the last decade, it's just mind-blowing. And it just, that kind of feedback is so visceral, of literally seeing what becomes of what you contributed to. So the highs are amazing, and it's what keeps me talking and advocating, is because I get to see over and over again the beneficial results of telling my story.
Thank you. That's great. I'd like to just summarize, because of course, I'm just relating so much to what all four of you have said. And I also have participated in trials and research. And I heard relationships, purpose, and also the gratification of seeing that your participation, I guess that's purpose, it's made a difference. I would like to ask something of you all real quickly. How many of you all are involved with research? Okay, so this should be very meaningful to you then. Okay, just wanted to do a check there. I hope you have lots of questions. Okay, here's our third question. What are some things that you'd like neuroscientists and engineers, and I would say, and students, if some of you are students, to think about when developing their research programs and new technologies?
Okay. Remember, my opinions are my own. Walking is not everything. Okay. I think that in the throes of the beginning of an injury like my own, everyone that I come across, even now when I'm working with patients and clients and things like that, they're all trying to reach back and become their old self again. And And in a lot of cases, that's just not possible. Your life is going to look different. And that is something that is very hard to grasp and grapple with for the first months, years, and sometimes lifelong for people. For me personally, I think that the importance of getting back on my feet waned away pretty fast. And I think that I really participated in a lot of like, especially like that exoskeleton research trials, because almost the people around me wanted me to be back to my old self more than I did. Because, you know, the people around you, it can be more, I've learned anyway, that it can be more um effectual on them what you go through than it might be on you. Um and then, you know, you guys are in this space of like developing technology and all of this kind of stuff. And as I've gone through the rehabilitation process and gone through my schooling and stuff, I learned a little bit more about all of that. Um, Anybody heard of the medical model of disability? Yeah. Okay. So that's basically saying that the disability that you have interferes with your ability to function and like participate in tasks in life. It's an antiquated model, is what we learn in school. Um, and it's shifting. It's going away from that. And there's a lot more of a holistic approach these days, but it really used to be that way, especially with like institutionalization and all of these different things. Um, but it's shifting towards more of like a social model, which basically says that the social perception and the structural environment is not designed to, you know, meet the needs of people with disabilities in the community. So I think that as you're developing technologies and doing research and all of these things, it's really important to focus on environment and like the psychosocial construct of things over deficits of particular individuals. Um, Anybody heard of universal design? Yeah. So I think that that's another thing that I learned when I was in school, and it's just really like trying to, you know, because as people who are developing technologies like this, we're like, okay, if we get them back on their feet, they're gonna look normal. They're gonna walk around like they're normal people, and we won't. I'm always going to be judged by somebody outwardly because of my appearance. But oh, if we can get him back on his feet, maybe it won't be so bad. But I don't think that that's the case. I think that we really need to focus on not the equality that that would bring, me being on my feet like the rest of you in here, but making things a lot more equitable. So really designing things and bringing technologies that are making things more accessible, getting people back to doing the things that they love, finding new things that they love, and being able to have experiences out there just like everybody else. It might look different. That's fine. And everybody kind of has to, you know, get over that and try to integrate this population into just normal life and kind of seeing them as normal people moving around. It's hard to do that. You know, I don't think that I ever met anyone in a wheelchair before I landed in one myself. So I probably would have had the same reaction seeing someone rolling through Target and getting their groceries and be like, what's going on, man? You know, um, so yeah, I think that just kind of really trying to educate the public and erase a lot of that is super important.
Those are such great points, Colby. I was just thinking about all the rec therapy stuff that Mac does, and he, you know, and the point that you made about walking is not everything. I'm telling you, when we first started, that's all everyone focused on is we want him to walk. Well, he's got a device that gets him everywhere he needs to be. It may be a little more difficult, but he can get around. What he struggles with is aphasia, which is the speech, and he struggles with a hand that won't open, so he's got one hand. So it was just funny because their perception was he wanted to walk. Well, he'll tell you he doesn't care about the walking. He wants his hand to work, and he wants to be able to talk to girls. So that's more important to him. But anyways, back to what I guess what I would share is that, well, I think that all of you that are doing research and development and doing this amazing work, I mean, you must, you're dedicated, you're committed to doing something to affect change. And I think that's wonderful. I I imagine that sometimes it's inspired by someone you know that you've met or that you've loved that's gone through something that made how did you arrive to wanting to be a neuroscientist or a biomedical engineer? But if you haven't, I guess my suggestion would be to befriend someone who has a challenge, whether it's physical or intellectual, get to know them, walk in their shoes for a day. I would say volunteer to caregive. I'd be happy to let you take him for a day. Offer me some respite. If you could see day to day what the challenges are, I think that you'll be a better researcher because you'll see real life problems that you could try to solve. When I was a middle school teacher, I used to lead up the Adventure Challenge. And if you're familiar with that, it's kids come in from middle school and high school to basically solve a problem that they've encountered. Well, when they're in middle school, their biggest problem is, I don't know, what is it? They can't find their phone. No, they probably can. But anyways, what I used to tell them is go to an adult, go to someone with real life experience and ask them what problems do you face every day and solve that problem, because that's really what it's all about. And so as a researcher and developer, I would say if you're trying to help those of us in the disability community, walk in their shoes for a couple of days and see what things we encounter. And I fractured my ankle recently. And so I've walked in his shoes a little bit and now I'm like, oh man, but anyways, my point is, I think when you are able to experience it real life, that's when you're going to see what problems need to be solved. And sometimes I think that we try to solve problems that really aren't problems if we don't do that. So that would be my suggestion. Although I will say that the ones that we participated in, I mean, they've been very, very good. So I'm not trying to downplay any of that. I was just trying to think of how can we improve the process? And that would be my suggestion, I think.
I'm going to quickly tag on to that is it hearing from actual lived experience, you know, is my motto is nothing about us without us, is, you know, this is going to be how you learn to ask the right questions and develop something that actually solves. For what it's worth, when I joined my trial, I did not think it was going to work because nothing else had worked and I had tried everything. And everybody was telling me there was no hope. I honestly viewed it as another step in a long line of the history of psychosurgeries, showing that we really don't learn from lobotomy. So no one was more surprised than me when it I'd like you to think about doing the hard thing and going after last line treatments. When I was looking for clinical trials or any new treatment to try to help myself, there were hundreds that were a first or a second line treatment. Like, you know, you're on your first antidepressant didn't work or your second one, you know, but there were exactly 2 for people who had tried everything and all treatments had failed for them. And if you can focus on those people, that I truly believe that's going to be where the breakthroughs are, is we are the ones who are going to give you everything we've got because everyone else has given up on us. And I am proof that you don't have to promise a cure or even improvement. I didn't go into it thinking that anything was going to change. We will participate just for the chance to contribute and to help others that may come after us. And on the off chance that perhaps something comes out of whatever suffering we're experiencing. So I know it's harder. I know there's so many more factors to consider and it is much more complex. But going for the true, any improvement on the things that nothing else has worked for, instead of the slightly incrementally better first line treatment, is gonna be the most impact you can make. So please do the hard thing.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to, that's our 3 questions. I'd like to thank you all very much. And I have to say for myself, I am really overwhelmed. You have so much courage and I have so much respect for you, and I thank you because it's I don't know. There aren't any words for it. And as someone who has participated in some small way in your experience, I just have to say that you have a lot of courage, and it's really wonderful that you're willing to share so that others can benefit from your experience. I'd also like to say thank you. We're not finished yet, by the way. So I'm just taking this moment to say thank you all for coming, first of all. But second, so many of you, if not all of you, have been involved in research. It's so critical. And I know I speak for everyone when I say thank you. Thank you for being willing to do this research and to look for the questions and the methodologies that will make a difference in many lives. And so I just wanted to, before we move on to Q&A, I just wanted to let you know that I know I speak for everyone. We really appreciate what you are doing. It's just, it's one thing to be on this side of the lived experience, but you have a lived experience as well, and we appreciate that you are contributing your time to benefit others. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes. Is that right for questions? Does anyone? Well, let me just ask. Does anybody have anything they want to follow up with before questions? Okay. Well, oh, go ahead, Colby. Go ahead.
Well, I kind of smiled. I guess I could probably say so. I didn't outright say I had something to say, but no, I think that just the panel up here is Mac and I were a little bit more similar, but I think that Brandy having you up here is really opening things up a little bit, which I think is really, really awesome. And you with mental health, I think that's an inroad that we've made a lot of progress on in terms of societal acceptance. I think all of us are thinking a lot more about like, hey, how can I get help with this and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that maybe some of the stuff that Brandy has gone through, she's a product of more awareness. So the more awareness that we could spread to people with other conditions, I think is even better. And you guys are kind of on the front lines of doing that. And I don't know if any of the few things that I might have said came off like in an interesting way, but I wouldn't be sitting in this chair or like be where I'm at, and none of us would be where we're at without the work that had been done prior to us being here. So you guys are on top of all of that, but there were so many people that came before you to put us in this position now. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Anybody else before? Okay. So we have a few minutes for questions. Yes, we have a question.
Well, I think Brandy said something about being treated as a collaborator, but I think maybe some of you also touched upon that in your trial. I was wondering how that came about. If you could tell us a little bit more about that and how we can do that.
Okay, the question was how can researchers invite participants as collaborators rather than just as subjects?
I'm happy to speak to that. I can tell you how my trial team treated it. Is obviously there are a lot of rating scales. Like there were so many rating scales. And there were obviously a lot of items that, you have to check the boxes because you're trying to get data across the entire trial team. But they went an extra step and we had actual conversations, not just about, do you think it's working? How you feeling? But how do you think it's working? What do you think we're not asking that we should ask? Like the actual going the extra step to actually learn what my experience was. Part of the reason why I'm no longer under a consent. Like I'm just following up with them because, I'm just proof that once you get well, you stay well, which is pretty awesome. But they continue every year to be like, so looking back on XYZ, what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on, like when the pandemic happened? It was like, because people think that, oh, now you're happy all the time. No, no, no. I am now mood appropriate. And when it's a dumpster fire out here, my mood is not awesome, but that is appropriate. So, that idea of, okay, well, what were the challenges for that for you? Of, were you scared you were getting sick again? Those sorts of items of just wanting to know what my experience was, what I needed, what parts of the protocol do I feel like helped, and what parts of the protocol do I think, I don't know if they helped or not, but it didn't matter as much. So my feedback helped them design the next trial, helped them decide what protocols should absolutely be mandatory. So that and being able to see the most recent trial participants and seeing how much better they are so much faster. Like, that's because they listened to me and didn't just check the boxes and move on. And that's what I call collaboration.
Thank you. Another question?
Yeah, actually, I have a related question, comment, and I would love to hear from you. Sure. I'm actually a sociologist by training, and I study medical technology development and medical science development and all. I've been studying stem cell therapy in a particular clinic, which has been very, very controversial as well. And one of the things which I found very difficult when I was navigating it was that in one way, the clinic was shutting down the voices of the patients, but when I was talking about it here, for example, I was a part of a panel of New England Journal of Medicine, they were also shutting it down by saying that, okay, these are gullible tubes and they're just going for a therapy without knowing much. What I was struck by, and I've been struck by studying it for quite some time now, that how much homework patients had done or knew about stem cell therapy. Would you like, because this is something often discounted, that as though they do not know as much about the technical. But I was struck by what is new research going on, what is other things they have done so much and they knew so much. Could you comment a little more, because that would allow what Brandy said right now with regard to listening aspect as well.
Yeah, I think that I'm not sure how much I might have to say. And I think that Brandy is actually a great example of someone who probably did a lot of her own homework, trying to find that eventual stopping point where I was like, okay, this is something that satisfied the need that I have. But yeah, I think that just being part of like different peer communities and things like that, and hearing, other voices of people with similar conditions to myself, everybody that wants something, wants to get better in some way or improve their quality of life, a lot of them are in the trenches trying to find something. That doesn't mean that they're like scrubbing scholarly journals, but they're asking questions, so they're always trying to find that next edge that's going to improve, kind of whatever major barrier might be in their way. But I think that you're right that you can't have that preconceived notion of like, oh, this is somebody who just volunteered for my study, but they don't really know anything about it. You should ask them questions about, what do you think about this? Is this working for you? What's not working? I think, finding those other little inroads, like Brandy said, so important. Because I feel like with many studies and things like that, it's so it can be so clinical and so by the book, and like she said, checking boxes here and there. But when you step outside of the focus and really look at the person a little bit more, their own particular wants and needs, their personality, just like literally getting to know them, I think that can open up so many more questions than you ever would have thought of in the beginning.
May I comment as well? To Colby's point, we are in the trenches still. We still are, because we do believe that Mac has a lot of improvement to go. I don't believe that stroke is, he's just gonna, this is it. I don't. We are constantly looking for something to help with this hand that is clenched tightly. In fact, we're trialing something right now called cryotherapy that is normally for pain management, but we're hoping that it'll desensitize his hand so that he can keep it open. So it's like a nerve block, but it's to freeze it. But to Colby's point, the way we find out about these things is in our communities that we hang around with now, other people with disabilities. We see a lot of it, and we ask questions constantly, and I'm on Google all the time. So I'm always looking for things to try to improve some of his conditions that we feel are still limiting his independence to some degree. Again, we are not letting it stop. We're not at home sobbing and that's all we do. No, not at all. But we are constantly looking for ways to try to figure out how can we solve this problem. So I think that I was just kind of trying to back up the whole peer thing that, we ask around.
I would, okay, one of the things that strikes me here is that I know the research is focused, laser focused. And I think what I'm hearing is that when you're on this end, you have a much broader perspective. You're not laser focused on one thing. And it strikes me that that broader perspective can actually inform and enrich your research that's laser focused, which is important that it's laser focused, but it gets informed by a broader perspective and maybe other fields that can inform what you're doing.
Yeah, I was just going to add too, like the latest study that I was a part of, I originally went in for just like the intake to see if I met criteria, and I did not. And then, through the establishment of the relationships that I had had with these people already, they fuzzed the criteria. And then, I got to participate in the study. So they were able to still, go forward and, learn what they wanted to learn, but I was also included. There was just a few different things that I might, I didn't have this particular response to this particular stimuli or whatever. So they fuzzed that. And then now they're probably gathering, hopefully more than they would have in the beginning.
Any more questions? Yes.
You all have talked about the importance of human connection when people are having you as a subject in their research studies. When it comes to just small talk that the researchers have made with you, do you have any favorite or least favorite questions that they've asked you?
Did everyone hear that? Okay. Oh, for the online people, thank you. The question was, do you have any, can you share, re-ask it, can you share any particular gems that?
Yeah, favorite or least favorite small talk question.
Oh, favorite or least favorite small talk that you have had with that's an interesting question.
No. Yeah. I wouldn't say any particular questions come into mind, but just in terms of the relationship, and you have to get to know the person, which I think obviously we've said that's important. I think though that people, even though I'm not actively part of a study, I am fortunate enough to work in the same building where this research lab is. So I do see these people fairly often, but they just connect with me and ask me how I'm doing all of the time. It doesn't matter whether I've seen them the day before, they're still interested in like what's going on with me. But I think that it's important because research can be serious, it can be monotonous, it can be boring. And they have just made it fun through conversation. Usually that's by picking on me and just asking me, crazy questions. And that might not be for everybody. But I think that kind of like teasing out and trying to figure out who that person is and then kind of seeing where you can go with conversation is definitely something that you should consider.
Anybody else?
I will add that for me, it was sort of the opposite. I hate being asked how I am. When you are severely depressed, that is not a question you want to answer because you can't really tell the truth, right? Because nobody wants to hear, I'd prefer to be dead right now. Like that's just not a thing. So, but I genuinely appreciated when the amount of effort it took for me, and I was always willing to do, like, I mean, we were known, my trial, we were known quantity, right? Like we had like passed all of we were very clearly identified as very depressed people. So anybody who was doing research on depressed people was like, hey, can I do an experiment on your people? We were all like, sure, go for it. So we did all kinds of experiments. And it wasn't that it was easy to do. It was just like anything that would contribute. It was, just let me do something. And when anybody was like, thank you so much for making the effort to get here today, when they understood how hard that was, when they understood that it wasn't just a matter of me getting up and rolling out of bed and coming to the thing, when they understood that this was hard and I was doing it to help them with their research, and they genuinely appreciated that, I would do anything for them, for that, for the recognition that this wasn't easy, that I was doing it because I wanted to help them. And when they appreciated my help, it made me want to help them more. So that has been a theme for throughout for the last 12 years. It has been everybody who I have interacted with has always been like, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for participating in this trial. Thank you for, doing 2 hours of eye tracking. You know what I mean? Like all of those things, they were just genuinely so happy that I was willing to participate. And that appreciation, that's all anybody, wants. So I would say heartfelt, earnest appreciation is everything.
Right. Well, thank you. I think we're getting really close to the end of our session. Jennifer, did
Yeah, yeah, actually, great. I'll take that.
So I just, first of all, want to thank you all for being here and listening to amazing experts in the field, right? Who are living with conditions that we're researching and learning more about. What I learned is that, we need to think about equitable resources, reducing the stigma. We need to think about accessibility, and that the world we live in is very different for people. We need to challenge the experts and seek what Brandy says, cosmic fortuity. I love that. We're talking about learning and being respectful and understanding the people you work with. We're all human beings, right? The possibilities of technology in the future is something that came out, and getting to see the beneficial results, in terms of why we participate. I really loved Colby's understanding of thinking about the social model of disability and how our environments really shape people's ability to participate. And I think that is really, really important, especially on this campus. If any of you have had the challenge of navigating it. So beyond, obviously, as well. And then really thinking about how we try to target those hard problems. The last of line treatments is where we're going to learn this idea that we need to listen. We need to ask questions, and we need to listen to people who are taking their time to be part of our research, and understand that participation is not easy. I'm sure just being here today was not easy. Making sure that this room was accessible, that parking was available, and that time was, compensated. So thank you all for being here. This has been so fabulous. And I really do hope this is the beginning of an environment at Georgia Tech where we include lived experiences. And so part of the NeuroNext initiative, when it becomes an institute, is really to institutionalize a center for lived experience advocates. So thank you so much for opening this door and opening our minds to your experience. Thank you. Let's give them a round. Thank you, Beth.
And I want to just say thank you for creating this, because so often I think those who have special conditions haven't been listened to, and this is a fabulous initiative. So thank you for your vision and your efforts to make it happen. And thank you all for coming.